right. Hi, and welcome. My name's Tracy Evans. I'm a partner and co-founder of Open Strategy Partners, GmbH. And I'd like to talk to you today about trust, the 10 ways to build better connections for better businesses and better communities. OSP was born out of some conversations and strong ideas about communication. And that has now become our communication model, which underpins everything that we do. And it's called authentic communication. And authentic communication is based on three elements: empathy, clarity, and trust. So naturally, I gravitate towards any material written on these topics. And most recently, I got the inspiration for this talk from a book written by Canada's former Governor General, David Johnston, called Trust, the 20 Ways to Build a Better Country. And in this book, he implores us to see that trust is gained through our actions and decisions, on our doing and not merely our saying, on the basis that can be observed and measured rationally. And he wants us to explore the attitudes, habits, and approaches that make people, businesses, organizations, and countries trustworthy. And it was a great source and inspiration for this talk. And so in this talk, I'd like to share with you 10 practical tips to mindfully build trust into your communications. And I'd also like to make the argument that if we put action like these at the core of how we communicate, we can build better connections, better businesses, and better communities. So I found this quote really inspirational. Whatever matters to human beings, trust is the atmosphere in which it thrives. And the reason why trust really matters today is that more and more people are making values-based decisions rather than strictly economic or otherwise. And this includes for topics like where they work, where they contribute, where they buy from, and definitely, what tools and services they use or support. These domains are where people are making more values-based decisions. And I would argue that trust is one of the most important or always underlying values that influence people's choice. And so for people to engage with your company or your project or your product, they need to connect with you. And in order to do that, they need trust. And so if we look at what trust is, starting from Oxford definition of it, is that trust is the firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of somebody or something. But it seems it's actually a lot more complex than that. Trust is an often overlooked phenomenon, but it's actually a really important one that's worth some deeper consideration. And even if that hasn't been the trend in history to bring that element into the business and the tech world, it's becoming more and more important these days. So I really love this model that Stephen Covey developed. It's highly structured, which I find really great. And we can easily translate this into our world, into the tech world, into open source world. And so when we look at this particular model of trust, we can see that he breaks it down into two main categories: competence and character. And if you look at the left side of this map or this diagram, we take a look at competence, and the general questions that competence solves, or that side of the chart solves, is things like, can you solve my problem? Can you solve it better than any alternative? Can I expect a high level of knowledge and experience to be baked into your product or services? And then when we look at the right side of the chart, this is more connected to today's topic, we look at character, and character looks more at things like, do your values align with mine? And I think in our space, I think it makes sense for us to break this down into 3 different types of values: moral, technical, and business values. And so what I mean by moral values answers questions like, do they source their materials in a sustainable way? Do they pay fair wages? Do they have a diverse recruiting culture? You know, and do these map to the moral values that I have? And therefore, the types of companies that I support, every dollar or euro that I spend is going towards an organization that has moral values in line with mine. And the second category of values is technical values. And it answers questions like, do they and how do they use open source and open standards? Does it align with the way that we use it? Do they treat users' data with respect? Do they use DevOps practices, you know, if that's important to you? And these are the types of technical values that is really helpful for us to consider from a strategic perspective and make sure that we're building that into the communications that we put out in the world, so that people can have a clear picture that your product or your company or brand aligns with those technical values. And the third category is business values. And this answers the question, you know, is your business model competitive? Is it transparent? Is it fair? Do you communicate in an open and authentic way? And things of that nature. So that's taking a look at Stephen Covey's model. The next piece that I want to talk about is the specific domains where trust matters most. And these might be domains that you tend to overlook when related to trust, but they are all really important. And we need to bring trust into our communication in all of these domains. And each one deserves a certain amount of attention building trust in those areas. So now diving into the 10 ways. The first point, and arguably the most important, is to be technically accurate always. And a simple, straightforward way to ensure technical accuracy is to interview the expert, and if needed, ask them to review your work. This is especially important for marketers and also technical writers who may not have the depth of knowledge that the developers on your team do. And that's a really great way for them to ensure accuracy in the writing that they produce. The second way is to be precise in your language and to not have any hyperbole in your content that you're putting out into the world. So to give you concrete examples, avoid things like best in class or only solution that, or our favorite, overusing the word innovative when you can actually be more specific. Another one is your solution is the only X you'll ever need. And definitely, and this is one that we see quite a bit, is that claiming that one technology or your technology will solve all of their problems. Not only are these types of statements inaccurate, they're also not helpful. they're so broad that it doesn't actually give the reader a clear picture of the value that you can deliver them. And so it's really important to be far more specific in your communications and talk about specific features that lead to specific benefits, and also talking about the specific problem that a particular feature set solves, and being that detailed and specific helps you to avoid hyperbole and helps to create more trust in your communications. Way number 3 is typewriting. And this is really important to have crisp, sharp, focused writing that is clutter-free and has no extraneous words. This one I find to be one of the most important ones. There's, too much noise around what really needs to be communicated dampens the trust that we can build. And crisp, sharp, focused communication, however, gives us the clarity that we spoke of earlier. And this is, so for me, and I forgot to give a little background at the beginning of the talk, but I come up from a business background, and that's what I studied, and that's been most of the roles that I've played. It's been more business or marketing focused. And so for me to understand whether or not a piece of technology is going to help me solve the problem that I have, I really need that communication to be extremely tight, because that makes it far more clear for me. And if I've got to do a lot of work to sort of swim through the clutter and swim through the extraneous words, it makes it so much harder for me, and we lose a little bit of trust along the way when we have that situation. Way number 4 is to have a clear narrative structure. And a clear narrative structure is similar to typewriting in that it's one of the big ones that provides clarity. But what it also does, it takes the reader in hand and leads them down a very clear path to the information or to the conclusion that they need to hear, that explains how you solve their problem for them. And so this one I also find to be extremely important, and definitely as a non-technical person, when writing is highly structured and therefore has a clear narrative structure, it is so much easier to consume, and for me to come to the conclusion that I really want to have another conversation with you about how your product can solve the problem that I'm facing. Way number 5. So an easy to navigate informational structure makes the journey easy and flexible for your reader. It allows them to choose their own adventure and to consume the bits of information that's most relevant to them. Each reader, we can't, although there's a lot of technology that helps us understand the reader's perspective, we can't truly know what's in their head. And so if we make our content easier to navigate, that they can get to the information that they need, particularly in a faster way, this helps, again, with clarity and therefore trust. And the way that we can do this is having the narrative structure that we talked about on the last slide, but also things like descriptive headlines, breaking the text down to smaller paragraphs that are easier to scan and pick out bits of information, and bullet points or other formatting that calls out the keywords or the important bits that your reader can grab for themselves and decide what's relevant for them in their journey. Way number 6, logical rigor, and being very wary of logical fallacies. For this one, we found a really great article that explained about at least 10 or 15 of these logical fallacies. And I've selected just a couple for us to talk about today, but it's definitely worth exploring this topic on your own and in your own editing process to make sure that you're avoiding these. But just to give you some small examples, one logical fallacy is overgeneralization. And this is where the writer bases the argument on insufficient evidence. The writer draws a larger conclusion than the evidence supports. And so, for example, if you're claiming that CMS A is a better CMS, you would need to do fairly exhaustive research and comparison with objective standards and unbiased results to warrant that claim. And you can, however, talk about a specific set of functionality supporting a particular use case that you haven't seen anywhere else. That would be a better way to go about that. Another logical fallacy is non sequitur, or it doesn't follow. And this is where the writer's conclusion is not necessarily a logical result of the facts. For example, stating that because CMS A has more functionality, it's a better CMS than CMS B. And obviously in this case, more has nothing to do with better. And so that's that particular example. Another logical fallacy is called begging the question. And this is where the writer presents as truth what is not yet proven by the argument. So before an argument on a topic can be made or a solution offered, the reader has to be convinced that there's actually a problem. So that's another one to avoid. Go for one more. There we go. Red herring. This is where the writer introduces an irrelevant point to divert the reader's attention from the main issue. You can do this unconsciously in reviewing your writing and reasoning. Make sure you examine the suppositions and conclusions you've made, and make sure that you are not making diversionary or non-relevant points to support your argument. For example, citing sales figures to show that one CMS has higher sales than CMS B doesn't prove that CMS A is a better platform than CMS B. And maybe we'll go for just one more. Argument ad hominem, or to the man. This is where the writer attacks the opponent's character rather than the opponent's argument. In a related vein, do not cite attack the reputation of an organization and cite that as evidence to make your point. You should remain unbiased and factual in supporting your claims. And if you're offering opinions, then the content should be clearly announced as an opinion. So that's just a couple of examples. And of course, there's a whole sea more of these logical fallacies that I would encourage you to check out for yourself. Way number 7 This is where we make mindful claims, and we do this by avoiding binary claims, so stating things like it's good or bad, or absolute claims like it's best or worst, and especially avoiding negativity. It's better to respect the nuance and situations where your product may not be the best, and just to try to be more specific about where your product does solve a problem more efficiently or more effectively or whatnot. And using FUD or fear, uncertainty, and doubt in our communication doesn't help us build trust by diminishing the value of the competitor. It's quite the opposite. So it's really important to focus on what value you do deliver and not what the competition doesn't. And this, on another note, doesn't mean that you shouldn't do comparisons. Those are a quite helpful piece of content for users, and I know definitely for myself, it's really helpful to sort of see what the difference is between each of the products I might be evaluating. It's just that we shouldn't use it to paint the competition into an especially bad light. Way number 8. This one's really important. Probably one of the most important ones is to back up your claims with evidence. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what makes up evidence, because there's some things that we can include that we may not have thought of before. And so breaking it down between quantitative evidence and qualitative evidence, and both have a place. And the best pieces of content have a nice mix of both. And so for quantitative evidence, we look at things like statistics or other research done by other organizations, or maybe you've done your own user surveys or interviews and whatnot. Another piece of quantitative evidence is case studies that have quantifiable outcomes. Looking at some of the qualitative evidence, these can be expert claims. Testimonials are fantastic. And we can also include anecdotal stories or examples. They provide some really great examples. And looking at case studies that have more qualitative outcomes, that can also be included here. And it also helps to supply evidence when you back up a benefit claim by explaining how the product is built to support that benefit. So our product provides X benefit because it's built containing Y and Z features. That's a valid piece of evidence and helps to create a clearer picture in the reader's mind about why you can claim that your product gives them a certain benefit. And also documentation backing up that type of thing is also really helpful. And if we want to take a minute just to think about what makes, what constitutes quality with a given piece of evidence, we need to ask ourselves, is each piece of the evidence, is it valid? Is it relevant? Is it unique? And we also need to ask ourselves, is the evidence directly connected with a cause and effect relationship to the claim? We can absolutely make emotional claims that have no other evidence other when appropriate, especially if we're quoting somebody else. You know, for example, we can say by working together, we make something greater than the sum of its parts. You know, that's a valid, you know, piece of evidence to put in your content. It should just be mixed with the other types that we've just listed off. Way number 9 is to speak from or reference an authoritative voice. And that authoritative voice might be your internal technical expert, developer, CTO, anybody that's worked, you know, really closely on the product, or it might be somebody community-based that has a reputation or a thought leader in the particular area that you're talking about. Or you can also, of course, reference research from another trusted source. That's also a way to reference an authoritative voice. And way number 10, we're slowly coming to the conclusion. Way number 10 is to recognize and acknowledge others for their expertise and knowledge, for their contributions, and even for their competitive offerings. And this is something that that Drupal and other open source communities tend to do really well. And I've seen a lot of evidence of this in the Drupal community. And it's definitely an important factor in building trust. And so it's great to see that there's so much of this type of content in the community space. So to sum it all up, I believe that these actions and ways of communicating lead to more trust. And more trust equals more connection, and more connection equals happier people, stronger communities, and better businesses. And my hope is that trust-infused communication becomes more and more the norm. And I believe that that will make the world a better place. And just a quick view on the sources of all the beautiful images that I found, mostly from Unsplash, which is one of my favorite go-tos. And these are all the artists of each of the photos that I took. And that's everything. So thank you so much for your attention. And I look forward to hopping over into the chat or forum or whatever it is and see if there's any questions there from the audience. Stop sharing. Okay. So I don't see any questions. I maybe can go to Zoom and see the participants. I see that there's 10 people or so. Apparently I'm supposed to be the host now, and I'm not sure if maybe I'm preventing somebody from unmuting, or maybe that there's just no questions. I guess we're all figuring out this online conference topic together. So, oh, great. I think that current questions, no current questions. I see Ahmad just posted hello. All right, then I think that's a great way to wrap things up then. I'm just checking. Oh, discussion chat. Okay. Thank you, Sarabi and Philip. The questions can only be asked in the On Air's live Q&A. Please ask it there and not in Zoom. And so I guess, so it looks like there are none. So thank you to everybody who was there. And oh, great, Janie's posting something. That's great. Thank you so much. And I'd love any feedback. If you have any. Other than that, I think that we can slowly wrap things up. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.